Right now, you can pull out your phone and know exactly what that bright object in the sky is. Jupiter, a weather satellite, the International Space Station. You can know within seconds. But for 290,000 years, human beings looked up at the same sky you're looking at right now. And they had no idea what any of it was. Not the stars, not the moon, not the sun itself. They had no telescopes, no science, no textbooks, no internet, just their eyes, their minds, and the most spectacular light show in history playing above them every single night. And here is what nobody talks about. They were watching a different sky than you are. Darker, brighter, more terrifying, more beautiful. A sky so full of stars that the Milky Way cast shadows on the ground. A sky where comets appeared without warning, where the sun disappeared in the middle of the day, where lights moved across the darkness in patterns that seemed to mean something. Something was happening up there, and they needed to know what. Because their lives depended on it. This is the story of the first humans who looked up. What they saw, what they thought, and what they figured out that still shapes your world today. Let's start with what you need to understand about ancient darkness. Modern humans have almost no experience of true darkness. Even in the countryside, even on a clear night, light pollution from distant cities softens the sky. The Milky Way looks faint, distant, almost fictional. Ancient humans had no light pollution. Zero. Their world went completely dark when the sun went down. The only lights were fire, stars, and the moon. And when you live in that darkness, when you have lived in it every night of your entire life, the sky is not background scenery. The sky is the ceiling of your world. Researchers who study traditional communities that still live without artificial light consistently report the same thing. The sky is alive to them. Not metaphorically. Literally alive. The stars move. The moon changes shape. The sun rises and sets in different places at different times of year. The patterns shift with the seasons. To an ancient human paying attention, and they were all paying attention because attention was survival, the sky was sending messages. The question was what those messages meant. Let's start with the thing that was most useful. The moon. The moon is the most reliably changing object in the sky. It completes its cycle in roughly 29.5 days. It goes from nothing, to a sliver, to half, to full, and back again, every single month. Without fail. This is a clock. And ancient humans figured that out extraordinarily early. In 2013, researchers studying a site in Scotland found what they believed to be a lunar calendar. 12 pits arranged to track the phases of the moon, dating to approximately 10,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest known calendars on Earth. But the evidence goes much deeper than that. The Venus of Lausel is a carved stone figure found in France. She is holding a bison horn with 13 notches carved into it. She is approximately 25,000 years old. 13 notches. 13 lunar cycles in a year. This was not decoration. This was record-keeping. An ancient human, 25,000 years ago, carved a counting system into stone specifically to track the moon, because the moon told them things they needed to know. When to expect certain animals to migrate, when certain plants would be ready to harvest, when the tides would be highest for fishing, when the rainy season was approaching. The moon was the first calendar, the first clock, the first practical tool made from observing the sky. And ancient humans figured this out not because they were told to look, but because the information was so valuable for survival that anyone who figured it out had an enormous advantage. Now let's talk about something that would have been genuinely terrifying. A solar eclipse. You have to imagine this from inside an ancient human mind. The sun is the most constant thing in your world. It rises every morning. It crosses the sky every day. It sets every evening. This has never once failed to happen in your entire lifetime, or your parents' lifetime, or their parents' lifetime. The sun is not just reliable. The sun is the foundation of everything. And then, one afternoon, something begins eating it. A shadow creeps across the face of the sun. Slowly, at first. Then faster. The light changes. The temperature drops. Animals go silent. Birds return to their roosts as if it is suddenly night. Stars appear in the middle of the day. And the sun disappears. Completely. For those 2 or 3 minutes of totality, the sky is black. The horizon glows orange in a full circle around you. And where the sun was, there is now a black hole ringed with silver fire. Then it comes back. The light returns. The animals resume. The temperature rises. But you have just watched the sun die and come back to life. And you had no explanation for what just happened. Researchers studying the psychological impact of eclipses on people who had never seen one before, including modern communities who experienced unexpected eclipses without prior warning, consistently found the same reaction. Terror, followed by awe, followed by a desperate need to understand. Ancient rock art from cultures across the world shows circular symbols that researchers believe represent eclipses. The event was significant enough to carve into stone, to remember, to warn future generations that this had happened before, that it would happen again. Some of the earliest recorded human writing, clay tablets from ancient Mesopotamia, shows astronomers meticulously tracking solar and lunar cycles specifically to predict eclipses. Not because eclipses were beautiful, because an unpredicted eclipse was catastrophic to a society. It created panic. It undermined faith in leaders who were supposed to have a relationship with the sky gods. Predicting an eclipse was one of the most politically powerful things an ancient person could do. The astronomer who could say the sun will disappear at midday 3 months from now and then be right was essentially wielding supernatural power in a world that had no other explanation for what was happening. Comets are different from eclipses. Eclipses are frightening because they are sudden. They happen without warning, and they change something that has never changed before. Comets are frightening for a different reason. They appear in the sky over days or weeks, growing brighter, growing longer, a smear of light that does not belong there, that has no pattern, that follows no schedule, that comes from nowhere and goes nowhere, and then they are gone, and you never know if they are coming back. Comet Hale-Bopp was visible to the naked eye for 18 months in 1996 and 1997. Imagine being an ancient human and watching that object grow brighter and brighter in your sky for 1.5 years. Researchers who study ancient human remains have found something remarkable about comets specifically. Some of the oldest known cave art, paintings dating to 30,000 years ago or more, contains what researchers believe are records of specific comets. Not random dot patterns, but arrangements that match the positions of real comets that would have been visible at those times. Ancient humans were recording comets in paint. Because what you paint on a cave wall lasts longer than a human life. And if a comet came once, it might come again. And future generations needed to know. The Neanderthals, the species we featured in the UFC video, were actually the last humans to see a specific comet that returned to our inner solar system in our recent lifetime. When that comet returned, astronomers noted something quietly remarkable. The last time it passed close enough to Earth to be easily visible, 50,000 years ago, Neanderthals were watching it from Europe. The same object, different sky, different minds. Same wonder. Now let's talk about the object in the sky that most changed ancient human behavior. Not the sun, not the moon, not comets, stars. Specifically, one group of stars, the Pleiades. The Pleiades are a cluster of stars that have appeared in the mythology, art, and agricultural calendars of cultures that had no contact with each other. Ancient Greeks wrote about them. Ancient Egyptians tracked them. Indigenous Australians have oral traditions about them dating back tens of thousands of years. Ancient Japanese cultures revered them. Pre-Columbian Americans incorporated them into their architecture. Every major culture on Earth that has been studied had a specific relationship with this specific cluster of stars. Why? Because the Pleiades rise and set with the seasons in a way that is extraordinarily useful. In the ancient Mediterranean, when the Pleiades rose just before dawn in spring, it was time to plant. When they set just after dusk in autumn, it was time to harvest. When they were directly overhead at midnight, the sailing season was safe. The Pleiades were a calendar that anyone could read. No instruments needed, just eyes, and knowledge passed from generation to generation. Ancient Greek poet Hesiod, writing around 700 years BC, gave specific farming instructions based on the position of the Pleiades. Plant when they rise, harvest when they set. But Greek farmers were not the first to figure this out. Indigenous Australian traditions about the Pleiades have been analyzed by researchers and found to contain astronomical knowledge that could only have accumulated over tens of thousands of years. The Pleiades were being watched, understood, and used as a calendar while Neanderthals still walked the earth. But ancient humans were not just using the stars for agriculture. They were using them for something much more fundamental. Navigation. Before compasses. Before maps. Before GPS. The stars were the only way to travel reliably at night or across open water. Polynesian navigators, following techniques developed by their ancestors over thousands of years, crossed thousands of miles of open Pacific Ocean using only the stars, the shape of waves, the behavior of birds, and the direction of wind. No instruments, no charts, no landmarks. They held the position of specific stars in their minds the way a modern GPS holds satellite data. Researchers who have studied these navigation techniques have noted something remarkable. The knowledge required to navigate this way across the Pacific is so complex, so detailed, and so precisely calibrated to the actual positions of stars at specific times of year that it could only have developed over many generations of careful observation. Ancient humans were not passive observers of the sky. They were active, disciplined, systematic students of the sky. They tracked it. They recorded it. They passed the knowledge down. They built structures aligned to it. Stonehenge in England, the pyramids at Giza, the Caracol Observatory in Mexico, the Menajra temples in Malta, all aligned to astronomical events with a precision that requires years, often generations, of careful observation. This is not primitive superstition. This is science, without the name, without the institutions, without the formal method, but with the core drive that makes science possible, the need to understand what is happening up there, and the discipline to watch long enough to find out. Let's talk about the Milky Way, because this is where ancient skywatching becomes something almost unbearably beautiful. Modern humans rarely see the Milky Way. Light pollution has erased it from the sky above most cities. Many people who grew up in cities have never seen it in their lives. But ancient humans saw it every single clear night. The full arc of the galaxy, from horizon to horizon. A river of light so bright it cast its own shadows, so dense and textured that it looked like something solid, like a road, like a river, like a path. Almost every ancient culture that lived without light pollution called the Milky Way something. The Greeks called it the Milk Road, from which we get the name galaxy. But in Norse tradition, it was the path the dead traveled to reach the afterlife. In Aboriginal Australian tradition, it was a river in the sky. In many Native American traditions, it was a road of souls. In ancient Chinese tradition, it was the Silver River. Road, river, path. In every case, something you could travel on, because that is what it looked like. A direction, a destination, a way through the darkness. The Milky Way was the ancient highway of the sky, and ancient humans did not just observe it. They mapped it. They told stories about it. They used its position and orientation to navigate at night. They tracked how its orientation changed through the seasons and used that to mark the passing of the year. In 2016, researchers published a study analyzing Aboriginal Australian astronomical traditions. What they found was astonishing. The traditions contained accurate descriptions of the Milky Way's structure, the movement of star clusters, the behavior of specific stars across seasons, and even references to dark nebulae, the regions of the Milky Way that appear dark because dense clouds of gas and dust block the light behind them. Indigenous Australians had mapped the dark patches of the Milky Way and built an entire constellation system around them. Not the bright stars, the dark spaces between the stars, called dark constellation astronomy. And the knowledge encoded in those traditions is estimated by researchers to have accumulated over at least 10,000 years, possibly much longer. Ancient humans were not just looking at the sky. They were reading it, like a language that the universe was speaking. And they were fluent. Now, here is the question that nobody asks. What did ancient humans think all of this meant? Not what did they observe. We can document that. But what did they believe was happening up there? The honest answer is that we can only partially reconstruct their thinking from rock art, oral traditions, the structures they built, and comparisons with living traditional cultures that have maintained unbroken connections to ancient skywatching traditions. But the picture that emerges is consistent across cultures. Ancient humans did not experience the sky as a physical space containing physical objects. They experienced it as a world, another world, above this one, populated by beings, governed by forces, communicating with the world below. The sun was not a star. It was a being, with intent, with power, with a relationship to the humans below. The moon was not a rock. It was a being, changing, cycling, feminine in most traditions, connected to water, to fertility, to the rhythm of life itself. Stars were not distant suns. They were the dead, or gods, or ancestors, or both. Looking down, watching, sometimes helping, sometimes threatening. A comet was not a piece of ice and rock on an orbital trajectory. A comet was a message, and the message was usually not good. Across cultures, comets were associated with war, with the death of kings, with disaster, with change that could not be stopped, because comets appeared without warning. They moved through the sky in ways that nothing else moved. They grew and faded on their own schedule. They were not part of the regular order. And in a world where the sky was the foundation of the calendar, the seasons, the planting, the harvest, the navigation, the social structure, something that disrupted the sky's order was genuinely threatening. Not metaphorically threatening, existentially threatening. If the patterns could be disrupted, then nothing could be relied upon. And a world where nothing could be relied upon was a world where survival was impossible. But here is what I want to leave you with. because this is where the story becomes something more than history. Ancient humans, sitting around fires in the darkness, looking up at a sky more brilliant than most modern humans will ever see, were doing something that we do not give them credit for. They were trying to understand, not accepting the darkness, not fearing the sky into silence, watching, recording, comparing, arguing, building, testing. A mammoth hunter in Ice Age Europe carved 25,000-year-old notches into stone to track the moon. A Neanderthal watched the same comet you can look up tonight. A Polynesian navigator memorized the position of hundreds of stars to cross the largest ocean on Earth without instruments. An Aboriginal Australian built a constellation system out of the dark spaces between the stars 10,000 years before the first cities existed. These are not primitive people fumbling in the dark. These are the first scientists, working without labs, without funding, without degrees, but with the same fundamental drive that pushes modern astronomers to build the James Webb Space Telescope. The need to know what is out there, the need to understand what is happening in the sky, and what it means for the world below. That drive did not appear in modern humans. It is ancient. It is in you. Right now. Look up.